Good afternoon and welcome to the special Board of Education meeting. We're pretty much going to talk about the budget this evening, but we'll be holding today's meeting at the Dennett Road Educational Complex. After an executive session, hopefully ending around 3 o'clock, we'll come back to public session to discuss the budget. Under Section 3-305B of the General Provisions Article of Maryland Annotated Code, there are two reasons the Board will go into closed session this evening: to conduct collective bargaining negotiations or consider matters that relate to negotiations, to discuss the appointment, employment, assignment, promotion, discipline, demotion, compensation, removal, resignation, or performance evaluation of employees and appointees or officials over whom this public body has jurisdiction, any other personnel matter that affects one or more specific individuals. Specifically, the topics for tonight will be 3-305B 9, topics including GCEA, GASA, and AFT, contract language updates, and healthcare parameters. 3-305B1, topics include personnel update and superintendent contract. The reason these topics will be discussed in closed session instead of open session is as follows. The negotiation topics pursuant to 3-305B9 disclosed above will be considered in closed session rather than the open session because of the confidential nature of collective bargaining process. Personnel topic pursuant to 3-305B1 disclosed above will be considered in closed session rather than open session because they include a discussion of specific employees, which is a confidential employment matter. Hearing all of that, are there any objections from any member to go into executive session? Hearing none, is there a motion to do so?
So moved.
Motion. Motion by Jason, seconded by Rodney. All those in favor of going into executive session indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. We are in executive session. Special board meeting to the public session, primarily to talk about our budget, our upcoming budget. So I'd like to thank each of you for coming. First order of business will be to approve the agenda, so I'll take a motion as such.
So moved.
So moved by Jason.
Second.
Second by Josh. Discussion. Those in favor of the agenda for the public session as provided, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. It is adopted. There is no public comment, so we'll dispense with that and we'll go right into business. Superintendent's budget priorities by the superintendent.
I am so technologically able that it is amazing to me. So Mrs. Smith is not able to be with us tonight. She is sorry that she's not able to be here, but we're deep into the budget process. Luckily for me, I have great staff present to help us look at some things tonight. What I really want to share with you tonight are what our budget priorities are as we begin to look at the fiscal year 2025 budget.
Yeah, I just interrupt for the board. As we go through this, certainly if you have questions, just raise your hand or interject questions. It is an open discussion because, again, it is the priorities from the superintendent, but it is the Board of Education's budget. So if you have concerns or ideas, please express them tonight. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. So on this first slide, it looks a little different on the screen than it does on my paper for some reason. No. The first thing that we talked about as we looked at the budget was expanding and enhancing the academic opportunities for our students. We plan to expand and enhance our early childhood program. Mrs. Ashby is here. If you'd like her to talk about that a couple minutes, Donna?
Sure. Yeah. My first question, how are we going to expand?
Oh, that's fine. I'm happy to share. So through the pillar, like we've discussed before, the pre-K is doing expansion, and we are joining with Head Start. After a recent meeting with the State Department, they were able to let us know that we are now able to partner with Head Start, and we can expand in counting our Head Start 3- and 4-year-olds, which is great news for us. Because whenever we have those classrooms with the expansion that we're talking about, that is $13,000 a student that we can get through the expansion. At the end, like with the expansion, it can, if you have 20 students in that classroom, that could be $260,000, which is great news for Garrett County Public Schools. On top of that, I'm working with local providers. The hard part with that, with getting them to join the expansion, is that they need to have early childhood certification. But we do have one that is working with me, and I'm going to help her write the expansion grant when it comes out, and she will be another one that joins us along with Head Start. On top of that, we are looking at the numbers as they come in for enrollment. It is open now to the public, and we are hoping to have enough students to have another pre-K back at Route 40, an expansion there. And we have started this year, which is kind of nice. We look at it a little different. Dr. McCartney worked with this idea with me, and I like it, that if we don't have a full classroom of 20, we could possibly even do 10. And it would still be considered an expansion. We wouldn't need near the staffing, of course.
Right.
But with the expansion, I do want to include that $260,000, that covers the salaries of the staffing. So those are ways that we are expanding. Any
Questions?
others?
Anybody? Any concerns? Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure.
Excellent, thank you. The other thing that we're looking at, continuing to look at, is our post-CCR dual enrollment AP, CTE opportunities, and I'd like Mr. Edwards to come forward. I was going to say try to do as well as Donna.
Well, as you guys know, Blueprint mandates that we pay for all the post-CCR pathway stuff. In particular, AP, so we cover the cost of the AP exams. Dual enrollment, regardless if that dual enrollment's with Garrett College, which is our primary partner in dual enrollment, or Frostburg State, or any other institution of higher learning that we partner with. And also the CTE credentials. So right now, like our machining students can take the NIMS exam, our carpentry students can take the NCCER exams. There's a cost associated with those, and we're by law required to cover those costs. In this regard, as you guys are aware, CCR designation occurs at the end of the 10th grade year, which is defined as really till the first day of your junior year. So you do have summer to designate somebody as CCR. All the students going into their junior and senior year that are designated as college and career ready, we get money for that. So the more students, obviously that's the importance of getting all those students to college and career ready, then we get an allotment of money for each student that meets that designation. That money then is locked box in a line item that can only be used for these programs. So the theory is you get your kids, your students, college and career ready, we give you some money, and then you have to spend that money on these post-CCR opportunities, which are paying for AP exams, dual enrollment, CT credentialing, et cetera. I have a feeling that as time goes on, especially because of the popularity of the dual enrollment opportunities with Garrett right now, that the allotment of money we get from the state and the amount of money we will have to pay to cover the post-CCR designation, things that you see on the screen, won't match. We will require some local money to cover that. What that amount is yet to be seen. I think this year we've got it covered pretty well. But you know, we're in scheduling right now, so we'll see how many students apply for dual enrollment opportunities, and that more than anything will drive how much that will cost us.
Is there a limit to the number of hours a dual enrollment student can take?
Currently, we do not have that. We've defined the window, Students can only take dual enrollment courses during the 180-day calendar year, so we don't pay for summer school and those things. It is important to note that we are in an interesting situation with dual enrollment that many other counties aren't. Because of the commissioner's scholarship, really the only cost to Garrett County Public Schools in dual enrollment are the fees, and then any books. And the college is making a concerted effort to move away from textbooks to go to open educational resource, but they're not there yet completely. So there are some book costs, certainly the fees, and then there's a discounted rate on tuition that's actually absorbed through the scholarship. So we do not have to cover that cost, which is great, but we do have the fees and the book costs.
Mr. Edwards, could you talk a little bit about the cap on the Bobcat Academy? Because I do think we have a cap, 15 credits, I think.
Yeah, so thank you for bringing that up. I was thinking strictly of the Garrett College dual enrollment. Yes, in Bobcat Academy, which is our program with Frostburg State, there is a 15 credit cap. You have to take a minimum of 12 credits and a maximum of 15. So there is a cap for the Frostburg.
So is it a possibility to get an AA degree at Garrett as you graduate from high school?
Yes.
Yes.
As we have it created right now, we offer two clearly defined paths for an AA degree, which are business management as one pathway defined, and then a STEM pathway in math and science. When I say defined, we sat down with the college and actually drew out, like freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, senior year, what you would have to take to be able to get the credit hours in. But yes, that if you're willing to make that commitment, we can get you there.
CCR student who is dual enrolled, either at Frostburg or still is eligible to be an athlete, a band student,
Yeah,
whatever.
great question. And unlike years ago when we had ECAP and you basically removed yourself from the school, this has totally changed. These are still high school students. We still get the FTE for them. Even if they're enrolled in Bobcat Academy, we still get that. And they are eligible for all high school activities, band, sports, etc.
Did you mention fire and rescue?
We are also currently in the process, I just got an update from the state today, we are trying to add the Maryland Fire and Rescue Institute program for our students. We have talked about this before. Big need in the community for that. There's some interest in our students in doing that. This will be a joint program, Northern and Southern together, supported by the local fire associations and fire companies. It will be housed at the CTTC Center at Accident, the Garrett College Center there. And it'll be a 2-year half-day program. So students know going in you're making a half-a-day commitment for junior year and senior year all year long to get this. But it's gotten a lot of positive publicity in the community. Hopefully we get enough students. It's run by Maryland Fire and Rescue Institute, which is out of the University of Maryland. So the good news for us is we don't have to pay an instructor, we don't have to pay for curriculum, we don't have to pay for anything. It's all covered by MIFRE, which is great. We will have some transportation costs. I'm hoping to offset that through the Perkins grant to be able to pay for that. So it'll be no cost to at least low cost to the public school system. But there is a student requirement. We have to have a certain number of students to get it running every year, because they're going to commit a staff member there that has to meet that criteria. They have told us they're willing to work with us to get it going, but once we get it going, we'll be required to have that requirement.
Other questions? What? Mr. Edwards?
After they graduate from the Fire Institute, do they get any type of certification? Or?
Yeah, so the beauty of this is if you go volunteer tomorrow at Benninger Fire Company, you have certain requirements as an adult to get certifications to be able to
Right.
even be a volunteer. This program will provide those to these students, so when they come out, they'll already have those, which volunteers need, but also paid personnel needs. So if you want to end up in the city of Cumberland paid fire company, you would need these certifications as well, and they'll have the opportunity to earn them. It is rigorous and it is difficult, but we certainly have students who will be able to meet that challenge.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
All right?
Delete,
Okay.
just in case, because I'm going to skip on the slide to dance, because as you've already heard, I think within the last month, we have added dance to the high school program of studies, so that is one of our initiatives for next year. So I want to pause here in case there are any
Any
questions.
questions about the dance program? I know we talked about it in an earlier meeting.
So will it only be at the
Should've
high
said
school or at the
Mr.
middle school level as well?
Just high school.
Just high school?
Anything else?
And this is also mandated by COMARC.
Right.
No new staff. It'll be taught by current existing staff.
Okay. Now, thank you.
You will hear that often tonight, no new staff. The priorities that we're looking at, we plan to put in place with reallocation of staff. And I'll touch on that a little bit more later. Other opportunities that we're expanding really are in the support materials mode for science and math. So, Dr. Miller, do you want to address that?
Sure, and I can certainly
Go to someone
leverage Ms. Warnick over there if there are specific details. But basically, we are up K through 12 in our math license and textbooks for all subjects of math, algebra, geometry, algebra 2, and then obviously K-8. So we are looking at continuing our license with Pearson. So we're not looking at adopting a new series. We're looking at continuing what we currently have into the next fiscal year. It's a vetted program. It's high quality. We know that it meets the state standards, and we've been seeing a lot of good success with it. So we're going to continue that. And then science, we will be putting a committee together next fiscal year to do an adoption of our K-12 science program as well. Anything to add, Ms. Warnick? Okay.
Have we thought about going away from books?
Okay, you go ahead
I'll
and
take that one, because one of the things we are looking at, probably because I suggested that we look at it, we are looking at the cost of all of our licenses overall. There are different school systems across the nation that are looking at, when you buy the license, if you don't buy books and then you need to renew, you're sort of caught in that renewal cost process. So I'm not saying that we're going away from licenses in any way. I don't want to say that. I don't want the headline to be, oh, we're not going to do any more digital learning. That is not true. But we are going to be very analytical about what licenses we have and how the renewal cost, the ongoing cost of some of that. And I believe, Dr. Miller, that I'm correct, that our math renewal license, if we get approval on an amendment, we will be buying that for a number of years with our federal ESSER monies.
Yeah, you'll see
So-
later in the slides, 5 years is what
Right.
will, and it'll put us on cycle that will help us, which you'll see a little bit later.
Anything else on math? Okay.
The other thing that is on this slide as an initiative is our intervention program. We've supported a lot of our intervention through the ESSER monies over the last few years. We are looking at that program very carefully at a school by school, and a lot of this is at the elementary school level to look at our staffing plan to be sure that we have enough people in our intervention staff to be able to meet our student needs. So we're looking at that very carefully. We're also looking at the intervention program at the elementary level to begin to pick up the gifted and talented program at the school level. Those staff are in place and we can use them in multiple ways. So not just for efficiency purposes, but for educational purposes. A child, if they are identified as gifted and talented, we really need to be addressing them 5 days a week, not 1 day a week. So we're looking into that program very carefully. Candy, anything that I missed?
No, you addressed it, thank you.
All right. You taught me well. So, next slide. We're also looking very carefully, as you know, at addressing the social and emotional well-being of our students. So, Mr. Hummel is not with us tonight, unfortunately, but I will do my best with support from other staff members in sharing what our plans are. Dr. Miller and Mr. Hummel and I have been working together a good bit this year, looking at the program and what we need to do to move forward. So, in our coordinated student services plan, which is still under development, but we've made great progress at enhancing that plan, we would plan next year to move from a 1.6 FTE position as a school psychologist to having that person, the 0.6 person, to become a full-time school psychologist. The other thing that we have as a goal in our budget priority is to increase our counselor positions to 15 positions, from 14 to 15. That would allow us to have a full-time person at just about every single school. Plus, because at high school and middle school, you have more. The other thing that we have to do as a part of the blueprint is to implement a behavior health screener that is a universal health screener that we use throughout the system with our students, and I'll get my initials wrong, but a multi-tiered support system program. That'll be another license agreement, I'm sure, in order to track our interventions with students and to really dive into what the health screener tells us. Second initiative under the social well-being and emotional well-being will be our community of poverty schools. We are projecting next year that Broadford, Crellin, Friendsville, and Grantsville will be new sites for the community of poverty grant program. Right now, that is in the state budget, and we're hoping it stays in the state budget, so this is the projection at this time. That would allow those schools, through that grant funding, to begin to do a needs assessment, begin to develop their program, to employ a community school specialist and a nurse full-time at the school. So we will be looking at those positions in that program very strategically as we look at current staff and how do we move forward with that grant program.
I probably should have asked this question a while back, but once a school becomes a community of poverty school, can it go back to a normal school?
Yes.
What's the do you know what the process is?
Oh, there is, it's not like if you fall out of the ranking 1 year to be a community poverty school. I think it takes
Do you
3.
know?
Go
I'm
ahead,
just- I don't know
Chelsea,
if
do
we
you,
know off
can
the
you
top of our head.
answer more
I don't know the
specific?
exact years, but I was just agreeing with what you were saying. It's not an immediate, you're out. It's a multi-year.
Yeah, I guess the reason for the question certainly is the obvious reason. We've hired people to be in those schools based on the fact that they're a community poverty school. Now, all of a sudden, if they're not a community poverty school, then we have a staffing issue, obviously.
You're right about that. But I think, and I'm sorry I can't
Well, it's-
quote the guidelines, but I think there's enough time within the span of years that they're looking at the level of poverty of the school to give the system a little forewarning. It's not like tomorrow you're not going to be there.
Right.
So that you would have an opportunity to look at that staffing and make some reasonable decisions about your next steps.
Yeah, I would also add that the schools right now that are on the list trend, historical
way.
trend shows that they're on the higher end. And right now, the threshold is 55% to be eligible over a 3-year average. So the schools that are on this list tend to historically be over that. So we're not just like barely making it in this case. So I think we'll probably likely be okay for at least the near future until we get a school that is like just barely there. Then that would come to question for sure.
You would tend to
Ms.
believe that based on the fact that the majority of those are in the southern end, that sooner or later, we could have a high school.
Well, and right, and so three of our schools on the southern end that would be community schools, Yacht Glades, Crellin, Broadford, they're also Title I schools. The 2 on the north are also Title I schools, Grantsville and Friendsville. So yes, they all feed with the exception, on the south, with the exception of Swan Meadow, they all feed into Southern Middle School and Southern High. What we struggle with, and until the state possibly changes this at some point, students don't as frequently turn in the free and reduced meals forms at the higher
Been there
grade
and done
levels.
that. Been there and done that.
Because when you think of the population and the students, the same students are matriculating up. So your poverty rate should be very much in line with those 3 elementary schools combined, which they're not right now. But hopefully at some point, we will see that for the South to get some additional support in those schools.
Sure.
Just a question about the enhanced coordinated student services, and you're increasing those FTEs. There's no way you can use extra money you're getting for the poverty schools to pay for some of those enhanced psychologists and behavioral health screener and that type of thing?
No, not, the community of poverty school money cannot pay right now for the behavior health screener. We will probably use federal funds, Title IV, I believe, Title IV funds to pay for that. You'll see on my final slide, we're using a variety of monies to move these priorities forward.
Okay, a little premature question, I guess.
Yes, we'll figure it out.
Anything else? And your third?
Yes, the third one, and I left my notes somewhere on this. This is not a good one not to have my notes on. But what we are looking at, and I want to make this clear, this is not a STARS classroom. What we are looking at is the possibility of establishing an alternative classroom here at the Dennett Road Complex for students in grade 5 to 12 who the principal, in working with Mr. Hummel and then with me, believes there's a chronic problem with suspension, chronic problems at the school, and moving those students for a period of time into an alternative classroom here at Dennett Road. We selected Dennett Road because we could identify space. We are looking at moving Becky Aiken back into the building so we would have a nurse on site. There are certainly administrators on site if we need them. We're still developing the guidelines for this program, but as you probably know, and Chelsea knows this much better than I, there are students who were limited to 45 days as we're looking at response to behavior issues for not having students in school. If we expel students or have them out for an extended period of time, we still have to provide their education program. That's our job. So this would really be beneficial in that regard, as well as giving our 5 to 12 principals, and this is where we think it's needed the most at those grade levels, giving them another tool to address student issues. And I do promise the board we will have more detail on that as we work through the budget process.
Just a quick question. How will you deal with transportation for kids from the northern end of the school that need to go?
We will provide transportation if the parent can't.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, those of us who have been around a long time, we've had this before.
Yes.
At Southern High School, we had the alternative school, and it worked very well. In my estimation, it worked terrifically, because many of those students yearned to get out of that situation as quickly as possible, and yearned not to get back in it. So,
Yeah.
I'm 100%, I think it'll be a very good thing, actually.
I think it's a huge step in the right direction.
Thank you.
Very good.
All right, so on the capital improvement front, you heard from Rich earlier on a couple things that we're looking at that are not on this capital projects right now. But as you know, we will be looking towards completing the renovation of Southern Garrett High School. That needs to be done by the beginning of the year, so that we can move our 7th and 8th graders into the high school. And we will be underway with the new Broadford School next year. So we have a couple other plans that once we meet with some of our partners, we'll be able to add those to the list. Long-term goal, as we're developing this budget, and I know it's a difficult budget year. Every year is a difficult budget year in public education, unfortunately. We hope to be able to establish, excuse me, a sinking fund for our turf fields. When Rich and I talked about this, he can correct me if I'm wrong, but we were thinking if we could develop a sinking fund eventually of about $600,000, 600 to 700, that we would have the money set aside then when the turf fields need to be refurbished. And we don't want to wait and have that happen at the last minute, so if we can work this out, we want to do it. The other thing, and you heard this from me when we looked at our fund balance from last year, trying to address our debt service. As we're working through the budget, we have not used some of that money yet because I got a little nervous about the budget and making things work for next year. But as we're putting this budget together, we want to look at that again, and if we can address it in this fiscal year budget, we would like to attempt to do that.
Yeah, I think, as I recall, and some of you may recall, I think we were told the longevity of those fields is generally in 8 to 10 years,
Yes.
especially in our climate, probably lesser, towards the 8. So if we can get, and right now, I think it's costing, about $450,000 to replace those fields. So if we can get that $8,000 or $9,000 in the bank,
Yes.
that'll be very helpful.
Yes, and as we're working at this, and Mrs. Smith is very good at this. She and I are very in sync with budgeting, and I'm pretty budget conservative, as is she, and trying to plan not just for this coming year, but a couple years out. How can we, with our slight decline in enrollment, manage our schools and meet the needs of our students? So on my next slide, if there are no questions on this one, I don't think there's any surprise to anyone on that. Looking at improving efficiencies, we look at this all the time. I'll re-emphasize that these are priorities and goals of the budget that I just went over. Until we pull all the numbers together, I'm not going to say that every single one of those things will happen, but we will do our best to make them happen. We plan to do this without increasing the number of full-time employees we have in the school system. We would do it through reallocation of staff as much as we can in order to move forward. We're also, I had shared with you a couple months ago, the staffing guidelines that we've worked on so that we have a look at each one of our schools and what do we think, regardless of the blueprint, what do we think each of the schools needs, and trying to look at our staffing through that lens. I'm going to ask Dr. Miller here in just a minute to look at curricular planning because one of the things we have done, she's worked with the other staff members in putting together a curricular plan so that we spread out over years how it is we're going to address our curricular needs in terms of licenses and textbooks. The last thing that I'll mention on this slide before I turn it over to Dr. Miller is we are not ignoring weighted student funding. I'd like to. I'm not ignoring weighted student funding. We're not ignoring weighted student funding. At the same time, we have been told this is our baseline year for weighted student funding. Weighted student funding, as we've looked at it each year, we've really looked at staffing in the guidance. We can look at other things. So, for instance, if a school is $20,000 out of line, we might be able to look at library books rather than new staff in order to, I just made up library books, obviously, I was stuttering on that one, but there are other areas that we might be able to look at instead of saying we need to hire additional staff. So we want to be a little bit more explorative in that regard this year. So what I would like, and these are screenshots, so they're hard to read, but you'll get an idea. If Dr. Miller would do the textbook, and we called it textbook, I should have said textbooks and licenses.
Yes, textbooks and licenses. So what you will see is quite small on the screen, but you all can blow it up. The lead team worked very carefully on this to help project forward for the next 5 years. And what you'll notice is that fiscal 24, fiscal 25, those two jump out at you. Right now we're in fiscal 24. Next year's fiscal 25. So we have like almost $1.4 million combined there that has kind of come all together to create this perfect storm. And we're trying to mitigate that, which we'll talk a little bit about on the next slide. But also, one of the ways long-term that we're trying to mitigate that is to really plan forward to have, like, all of our social studies instructional materials purchased K-12 in 1 year, so that we're not doing some social studies for certain grade bands this year, some next year, some the year after, but really thinking about year over year, where are we at with that particular content, and how can we space it out so that we can even out the amount that would be needed in the unrestricted budget to support the adoption. So what you'll see when you get a little bit further right on the document, fiscal 26, fiscal 27, it starts to level out. And we start getting into a process of usually somewhere around 600,000, which is a whole lot better than 1.4 million. But we wanted to really try to get it to a point where it's evened out. You'll also notice the ELA elementary has been historically one of our largest instructional material costs, and that we did split over 2 fiscal years in order to help balance that out. But you will see in almost all cases where we try to get all ELA to adopt within the same year or across 2 fiscal years, all math at the same time, all social studies at the same time, and all science at the same time, because those are our largest instructional material costs. So how do we want to mitigate for this coming year and the current year that we're in is on the next slide.
Can I ask a question about this slide?
Sure.
I was looking at AP textbooks.
Yeah.
So how do you budget for that, not knowing the amount of students are going to, whether we're going to offer the class this year, not
Yeah.
offer the class next year?
So we do a class set of textbooks, not individual student textbooks. So we do it, it's kind of usually always the same amount. We just kind of budget around 12,000, and there typically are textbooks for AP courses. And in some cases, our faculty are using textbooks that have been in our system for many, many years. And
Yeah, which is a concern.
well, they feel that they still align to the standards. And
Okay.
as long as the teacher feels that they align to the standards, then certainly it seems appropriate to continue to use those textbooks as long as they're not damaged in some way. But we do rely on teacher recommendation for that. But we do class sets.
Yeah, well, I was just noticing on your slide there that I think there's a AP research text, a seminar text, but in terms of textbooks, there's only a couple or 3.
Yes, so those are new. That's a very good point, Mr. Woods. AP Research and AP Seminar, you will see on here, those are new AP courses that we will be implementing. And it is leaving my brain as to which one comes first. I think it's, is it Seminar? Okay, so Seminar will be implemented this coming year for the first time. And then after students take Seminar, they can take Research. So the Research will be implemented the next year. And once we get that pathway set, that will allow students to earn an AP capstone diploma. So those were the AP texts that the team knew needed to be on the sheet. Certainly this is a projection. AP is not a huge cost when you think about in
right.
comparison to some of the
Sure.
others. So there's likely, these are all estimates. There's likely enough wiggle room to deal with a class set of texts if we need to, because typically you don't have more than one class set for an AP course either. So,
No. And typically it's 10 or 12.
yeah.
Okay.
So on the next slide, what this shows is the top section in blue, what our goal is at this point, and as soon as we're able to get the amendment signed, I will be sending it to MSDE. I know you signed it. You signed it. We need Mrs. Smith's signature. So as soon as we get that, the amendment's ready to go, you can see we have budgeted, what's that number, 800? Yeah, $829,391 dollars to be funded through our ARP ESSER as part of our spend down plan for that grant. All indications, and working with Ms. Moss and the state, are that we will be able to use ARP ESSER and Maryland Leads to support instructional resource purchases that will be used beyond the lifetime of the grant. And we've worked with our auditor on that, and we've worked with the state as to how to describe that in order for it to be an allowable cost. So that work has been done, and we feel very confident that that should go through once we're able to get that reviewed. So that top section is all ARP ESSER, which is going to help us get through this bottleneck that we're in right now. Maryland Leads is the green chunk, and then the yellow is what is currently being proposed for the fiscal 25 budget, which you'll notice is the huge purchase there is the science K-12, although there are a few others. And then the bottom section in like that purplish color, those are annual expenses year over year that are outside the scope of these multi-year purchases when we're trying to get an instructional resource for a particular content area for more than 1 year. These are more year over year costs. And we're not asking in the year over year costs for an increase. We've reallocated some things, but it's really a slight decrease in what we're proposing. So.
Questions? Anyone? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Great. So the next two slides, if Mrs. Miller was here, she'd go into great detail. I'll tell you, you've already seen these slides. You saw these last month at the board meeting. So, I said Mrs. Miller. We do have a Gloria Miller. We did have. She was a nurse when I was here 20-some years ago. She's no longer here. Mrs. Smith is here, and she is the director of finance, and she could go into these numbers in great detail for you. But again, you've seen them before. What we are trying to do, because if you look at our state aid and you look at our local aid, we're pretty much at an even level of funding as far as new money. And I will tell you, one of my concerns with the blueprint, and I like a lot of the components of the blueprint, but when it comes to funding, they silo money so much that it is difficult to maneuver through part of the budgeting process. So I'll just move to this final slide, which says that the goal of our budget is to support the priorities that I've outlined for you tonight by utilizing minimum level of funding from the county this year, our state and federal monies and our fund balance from fiscal year 2023, and the savings that we make from lapsed salaries and unfilled positions. So that's our goal. So those are our budget priorities at this time. I will try to answer questions, and certainly open to input from the board, because we want this to be our budget.
Okay, open discussion.
Can you just explain why Broadford Elementary School will be still called Broadford Elementary School and the impacts that has,
Why Broadford Elementary will still be called Broadford
and not Southern Elementary?
and not Southern Area Elementary School? Well, for one reason, it's not the only Southern Area Elementary School. But the most important reason is we looked at this, and Mrs. Ashby looked at it through Title I. One of the very important reasons is in order, if we were to call it a different school and name it as a new school, we would have to they would not be eligible for Title I fundings for a year. We would have to go through MSDE to reevaluate the school and bring it into Title I funding. That Title I funding makes a major difference at that school for each of our students. And knowing that it's not the only elementary school, and I don't say elementary when I just call it Broadford School. But that's the major reason. There's a very negative impact if we change. And I was told it was called Southern Area Elementary just because we needed to name it on the architect's drawing.
Questions? Other questions?
I'm sure you're figuring this out, but, and, you know, you keeping the FTEs constant, you're not increasing them and you're not reducing them. And you have these other priorities that you're adding. And, you know, the blueprint also requires major investment in staffing, in salary enhancements, national certification and that type of thing. How are we accounting for that in this budget? I know it's a hard question.
As we know that in the blueprint, and I won't have the year right, Mr. Glotfeldy, but we need to be at $60,000 as a starting salary for our teachers. So Dr. Wilderson has done a great job of stepping that out for us. And part of this, I'm stuttering a little bit because we're in negotiations. So we have to look at, I have to be somewhat careful. A lot of our funding through Blueprint, now it used to be that we had maintenance of effort, and the county had to fund us at that level. We are now to the point that the cost of the Blueprint is greater than that. So that's why we have that level of funding from the county that they must provide. That, along with what the state is providing in certain areas. As Mr. Edwards mentioned, with the CCR standards and getting money to help fund that. I think we are going to have to be very analytic and very strategic as we go forward with the Blueprint and looking at all of those programs because they don't fully fund anything. When the Blueprint, they may say that on the career ladder, certain teachers will receive more money because they're nationally board certified, but you also have to look at your monies other places because other groups, you need people to want to become administrators and go into different fields, and they don't provide money for that. So it's not quite a nightmare, but it's pretty close to one. We're very lucky in the sense that Mrs. Schweitzer, when she was here, and Dr. Miller and the rest of the finance staff have looked very careful at the use of our ESSER funds. And that is helping us as we transition.
It's a difficult problem, so. There may be some help on the way with legislation that's currently in the process of, for instance, an inflation factor that would be added to your funding every year from the state. And reestablishing the maintenance of effort and those type things. So, and the weight of funding, there might be some initiatives on that. So it's still pretty early to figure out how it's all going to wash out, but I know you're thinking about it. Thank you.
And I'll add, I'm not the only one thinking
Oh, I
about
know.
it. The staff has been, we're pretty much, we're going through the budget book page by page to look and be sure that we have things budgeted as close to the right categories as we have, as we can. We have not had an opportunity, Mrs. Smith and I have not had an opportunity yet to sit down and look at what that big number is at this point and how we're going to be able to address some of those needs.
Well, one thing for sure, there's other counties that have much greater problems than we do,
Yes, they do.
believe it or not.
I guess the summation of the budget priorities is, let's look at what's our outline? When are you going to give the board your proposed budget book?
Soon?
Tonight?
No.
That would be soon.
No. What we had planned to be a little farther along than we are right now. We can't really settle on our salaries and wages until we are a little farther along in the negotiations process, so that is a little bit of a holdup. I would expect that by the next board meeting, we should be able to, you're used to having that budget book with all of the pages. We intended to have that ready for you tonight, but because of a lot of different circumstances, it isn't. I would expect it to be ready for you by next month, if not soon. Oh, well, wait a minute.
That's 2 weeks, that's less than 2 weeks.
Not 2 weeks.
You're talking about
we-
April?
April at the latest.
Okay.
We might actually be able to make it March. But we have a lot on our plates, of course, and I hope to go to Annapolis for a couple days to testify about weighted student funding, and that's, the budget's a priority, but trying to address weighted student funding.
I
is
guess
too.
what I'm trying to do is so the board knows kind of what our timeline is going to be.
Yes.
If we did get the budget book for the first read in April, it would probably be maybe the June board meeting before we would vote on it.
And I am hoping to be able to speed that up
Okay.
so that we can get it approved sooner than that. But it is difficult for me to make a promise tonight.
No, I understand.
Part of it is because of, well, there are lots of reasons.
Sure, yeah.
Yes.
We just need to, I guess, have some idea what the next 3 months hold for the budget, as that's our major,
Yes.
along with negotiations. Those
Right.
are the two things that are driving
And
the school system
and
for a
those two
while.
things need to go hand in
They
hand.
do, they have to go hand
But
in hand.
again, we were hoping to have all those budget pages for you tonight. I
No,
would
that's-
expect we'll have those soon.
That's not, I don't think it's a problem for any of us. Anything else? I would say, remiss, I should have said at the beginning, our other board member, Ms. Liller, had a professional obligation this afternoon, was unable to attend because of that obligation. And we did say to our student board member, she did not have to come for this meeting, so that's why both are gone. Okay.
Thank you.
We have one more item to do, and then we are going to adjourn for the evening. By law, we must appoint a superintendent, and tonight is that job that we have been given. And so with that being said, I will open the process by saying, is there a motion to appoint a superintendent?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we appoint Dr. McCartney as the superintendent, assuming that we receive approval from the State Board of Education.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor to second to appoint Dr. McCartney to a 4-year term, which would commence on July 1, 2024, and end, I guess, June 30th, 2028, correct? So the motion is on the floor with a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, there is a motion on the floor. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And it is a unanimous vote. Congratulations, Dr. McCartney.
Well done.
She's doing a great job.
Any comments? No.
Not tonight. I should comment.
Okay, please
That
do.
would be inappropriate not to comment. When I was asked to come back for a year, that was a biggie. And then when we began to talk about 4 years, that was an even bigger biggie. But having spent the year here with both the board and the members of the school system, it just feels like the right thing for me to do. And I am very honored that the board feels the same way. And I look forward to working with everyone for the next 4 years to support the school system as we move forward.
Thank you.
So thank you very much for the trust.
Thank you. I will now take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved by Jason, seconded by Josh. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, nay, and we are adjourned.